Would you like a cup of coffee? I owned and ran Bowen's Coffee, a cozy little cafe in the heart of Fairwick, a city known for its eerie, perpetual fog that cloaked the streets. Business had been steady until I hired Tyson Mosley, a quirky but efficient barista whose odd habits were overshadowed by his knack for making perfect lattes. Little did I know, his course were a cover for something far darker. It all started on an otherwise uneventful Thursday. Tyson walked into my office, a resignation letter in hand. His timing couldn't have been worse. We were understaffed, with our waitress Julia barely managing to rush on her own. "I need my labor book, Bowen," Tyson said, his tone calm, but his eyes oddly intense. "Why so sudden, Tyson? Did I do something wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my irritation in check. He gave a cryptic smile. "Let's just say, I've overstayed my welcome." Before I could press him further, Tyson lit a cigarette, a strict no-no in my cafe, and started pacing. "I used to think like you, Bowen," Tyson began, exhaling a plume of smoke. "A realist. Practical. But the world isn't as straightforward as we want to believe." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He leaned against the counter, fixing me with a piercing gaze. "Do you know about the head stealers?" "The what?" "Predators," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They look like us but aren't. They steal heads, Bowen. Real ones. They use them as camouflage to blend in." I let out a nervous laugh. "Tyson, if this is some elaborate joke, it's not funny." "I'm not joking," he snapped. "I've studied them. They're like giant insects, mimicking human behavior while they scout for prey. In this place, Bowen's Coffee is the only reason I'm still alive." My patience was wearing thin. "How does my cafe factor into your delusion?" Tyson smirked. "Simple. My saliva. I've been adding it to the coffee." I recoiled in disgust. "You what?" "Relax," he said. "It's harmless to humans. But to the head stealers, it's like garlic to a vampire. They avoid this place because of it." I stared at him, speechless. "You don't believe me? Fine. But when they come, and they will, don't say I didn't warn you." Tyson handed me his apron and bag of bolognas. "One last coffee for the road, Bowen," he said, placing 2 steaming cups on the counter. Suspicious. I had the cup. "You didn't add anything to this, did you?" "Not this time," he replied with a chuckle. Reluctantly, I took a sip. It was good, too good, almost. Tyson had a way with coffee, even if he was certifiably insane. As he left, he turned back with a parting shot. "Come and Bowen. Spit in the drinks if you want to survive. Oh, and Julia? Keep an eye on her." The cafe grew unusually busy that evening. Groups of teenagers, street performers, and tourists filled the space, their chatter and laughter echoing through the room. Julia worked tirelessly, balancing trays of coffee and pastries. I was in the back when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tyson. "Look at the table near the window. You'll thank me later." He sighed. "No eat." But curiosity got the better of me. Squinting, I focused on the group of teenagers Tyson had mentioned. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. But then I noticed something chilling. One of the teenagers, a tall, lanky figure in a hoodie, moved awkwardly, as if its limbs were too long for its body. Then I saw it. A gray, insect-like creature with sharp legs and a pulsating tentacle extending from its mouth. I blinked, hoping it was a trick of the light. But no, it was real, and Julia was walking straight toward it. Before I could react, the creature grabbed Julia. No one else in the cafe seemed to notice as it pulled her close and attached the tentacle to her neck. My stomach churned as I watched the life drain from her body. Moments later, Julia stood upright, smiling as if nothing had happened. But her eyes, they were empty. I stumbled back to the office, trembling. My phone buzzed again. "Now do you believe me?" Tyson's text continued. "Spit in their coffee, Bowen. It's the only way to keep them at bay. Julia is one of them now. If you want to survive, you'll do it." My hands shook as I read his words. The head stealers were real, and they were in my cafe. Then, Julia's voice called from the door. She smiled, holding an empty tray. "The table near the window needs more coffee." I stared at her, torn between fear and disbelief. Was she still in there? Oh, is she truly gone? My instincts kicked in, grabbing the coffee pot. I added my special ingredient and brought it to the table. The head stealers left without incident, but the memory of that night haunted me. Tyson was right. This was my new reality. Bowen's Coffee became more than a cafe. It was a battleground. I began spitting into every cup, my only weapon against the creatures that lurked in the foddy streets of Fairwick. And every night, as I locked up, I wondered, how long could I keep this up before they came for me? Life at Bowen's Coffee took on a strange rhythm after that night. I adjusted to my bizarre, secret ritual of fortifying every cup of coffee. The initial disgust gave way to grim resolve. It wasn't just survival, it was my quiet rebellion against the head stealers. But things got worse before they got better. Juliet continued to work as if nothing had happened, her sunny demeanor now deeply unsettling. She laughed at jokes, chatted with customers, and carried on her duties perfectly. But her eyes, they remained cold like glass marbles. The first time she spoke to me after her transformation, I nearly dropped a tray. "Bowen," she said with a tilt of her head. "Why are you staring? Something on my face?" "No, Julia. Just tired," I stammered. Her smile widened. "Too perfect, too unnatural." "Well, you should rest more. Don't eat to burn out, boss." I managed a weak laugh and escaped to the storeroom, where I texted Tyson. "She's still here. Jean, Deltis." His reply came almost instantly. "Keep her busy. She won't hurt you." "Yes, the longer you serve them, the more they'll want to keep you alive. But be careful. They'll test your loyalty." A week later, a man named Roman arrived. He was in his late 40s, with a rugged face, a leather jacket, and a quiet demeanor that screamed trouble. He ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream. As I handed him the cup, he locked eyes with me. "You spit in this?" I froze. My heart raced as I tried to gauge if he was friend or foe. "Excuse me?" Roman leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "Relax. I'm not one of them." Tyson said me. Relief flooded me, though I didn't let it show. "Why didn't he come himself?" Roman smirked. "He's on the run. Apparently, he got too close to their nest, but he thought you might need some backup." I hesitated, then gestured for him to follow me to the office. Over the next few hours, Roman filled me in on the head stealer's world. "They're not just parasites," he explained, sipping his coffee. "They're organized. They scout, they infiltrate, and when they're ready, they swarm." "Yeah," I echoed, dread creeping into my voice. Roman nodded. "A town like Fairwick? Prime territory. They probably marked it as a feeding ground. That waitress of yours? She's a scout now. She'll report back to the others, and when the time is right, they'll descend." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process this. "So, what do we do?" Roman set his cup down. "We prepare. Fortify the cafe, watch for signs, and if it comes down to it, we fight." The first test of our resolve came on a stormy Friday night. The rain pounded against the windows, and the power flickered ominously. Only a few brave souls were in the cafe, huddled over their drinks. That's when he walked in, tall, with an angular face and a sharp suit. The man exuded an air of authority. He glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on Julia before settling on me. "Bowen Cash," he asked, his voice smooth as silk. "Who's asking?" I replied, feigning nonchalance. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's just say I'm an interested party. May I have a moment of your time?" Roman, who had been sitting in the corner, tensed. I gave him a subtle nod, signaling him to stay alert, and led the man to a secluded table. "Donero so fair. I'm Joe," the man said, extending a hand. I didn't take it. "Okay, Joe, what do you want?" He chuckled. "Straight to the point. I respect that. I represent a collective. We've noticed your little establishment has become quite the gathering spot. Unusual clientele. Wouldn't you agree?" My blood ran cold. He knew. "I wouldn't call it unusual," I said carefully. "Just diverse." Joe leaned in, his eyes glinting like polished steel. "Let's not play games, Bowen. You've been interfering with our plans. But I'm a reasonable man. Join us, and you'll be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams." refuse, and well, accidents happen. Before I could respond, Roman appeared at my side, his hand resting on the hilt of a concealed knife. "Problem here, Bowen?" Roman asked, his voice calm but menacing. Joe's smile didn't waver. "Not at all. Just a friendly chat." He stood, smoothing his suit. "Think about my offer, but don't take too long." Joe's visit marked a turning point. Roman and I knew we couldn't keep the head stealers at bay forever. We started fortifying the cafe, installing heavy locks, blackout curtains, and even a makeshift alarm system. I reached out to Tyson, begging for more advice. His reply was cryptic as always. "When the swarm comes, you'll know. Trust no one, not even yourself." Meanwhile, Julia's behavior grew more erratic. She would disappear for hours, only to return with no explanation. Customers started complaining about her, saying she made them uneasy. One evening, I confronted her. "Julia, where do you go during your breaks?" She tilted her head, her smile as unnerving as ever. "Oh, just clearing my head? You're lying," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. "Careful, Bowen. You wouldn't want to lose your best waitress, would you?" It happened on a moonless night, just as Tyson had warned. The fog outside thickened to the point where you couldn't see a foot in front of you. The cafe was empty except for Roman, Julia, and me. The first sign was the noise, a low, humming buzz that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Roman grabbed my arm. "They're here." The windows rattled as dark shapes moved outside, their insect-like bodies barely visible through the fog. Julia stood by the counter, her expression eerily calm. "You should have taken Joe's offer," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. Roman and I exchanged a glance. "Get the coffee," he whispered. I rushed to the machine, spitting into every cup as fast as I could. Roman barricaded the doors, while Julia watched, her smile returning. "You can't stop them, Bowen," she said. "This is their world now." As the swarm closed in, I noticed something strange. The head stealers hesitated, their movements jerky and uncertain. The coffee. It was working. "Roman!" I shouted. "Throw the cups outside." He didn't hesitate, hurling the steaming drinks at the advancing creatures. They recoiled, their shrill cries piercing the air. But it wasn't enough. The swarm was too large, and our defenses were crumbling. Then, a sudden burst of light filled the room. Tyson burst through the back door, carrying what looked like a modified leaf blower. "Miss me?" he shouted, unleashing a spray of mist that sent the head stealers into a frenzy. With Tyson's help, we managed to drive the swarm back. By dawn, the cafe was a wreck, but we were alive. Julia was gone, leaving behind only her uniform and a faint smell of decay. Tyson explained that the mist was a concentrated version of his special ingredient. "He'd been working on it ever since he left. You're not out of the woods yet," he warned. "They'll be back, stronger." Bowen's Coffee reopened a week later, a little worse for wear, but still standing. Roman stayed on as my unofficial security, and Tyson became a regular visitor, his eccentricities now a welcome comfort. The fight wasn't over, but for now, Fairwick had a glimmer of hope and a damn good cup of coffee. The week after the attack was a blur of repairs, late nights, and whispered conversations about what to do next. Roman stayed in the cafe almost every night, reinforcing the barricades, fixing the windows, and devising new strategies to keep the head stealers at bay. Tyson, who had reluctantly decided to stick around, set up a makeshift lab in the back room. It smelled like burnt coffee beans and chemicals, but he promised his concoctions were getting better. "This isn't just a deterrent anymore," Tyson explained one night as he tinkered with his equipment. "It's a weapon. We're gonna make them regret ever targeting Fairwick." I admired his determination, but couldn't shake the nagging feeling that we were still woefully unprepared. The cafe reopened under the guise of renovations complete, but the air of normalcy was paper-thin. Regulars came back, though their faces were drawn and their conversations hushed. Everyone felt the lingering unease, the kind you couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Then came the strangers. At first, It was a pair of sharply dressed men who ordered black coffee and sat in the corner, speaking in low tones. Then a woman in a long coat with a silver scarf, who stared out the window the entire time. None of them looked at me directly, but I felt their eyes on me all the same. Roman noticed too. "They're scouts," he muttered. "More head stealers?" I asked. "Not sure," he admitted. "Could be something worse." The thought made my stomach churn. 2 weeks after she vanished, Julia returned. It was late, near closing time, and the cafe was empty except for Roman and me. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Then, the door creaked open, and there she stood, looking almost exactly as she had before. "Bowen," she said, her voice a perfect imitation of her old self. "Did you miss me?" Roman stepped between us, his hand instinctively going to his knife. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Julia tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "I came to warn you." "Warn us?" Roman scoffed. "They're coming," she said simply. "The scouts have reported back, and the swarm is preparing to descend. You have a choice, Bowen. Surrender the cafe, or resist." I clenched my fists. "And what happens if we resist?" Her smile returned, colder than ever. "Then you'll see what true despair looks like." With that, she turned and walked out into the night, leaving a trail of icy dread in her wake. The urgency of Julia's warning left no time for doubt. Roman and I agreed. If the swarm was coming, we needed help. Tyson suggested reaching out to an old contact of his, a woman named Amelia, who had once worked with him in alternative pest control. According to Tyson, she was an expert in repellents and traps, though her methods were unconventional. Unconventional how? Roman asked suspiciously. "She believes in a mystical side of things," Tyson admitted. "But hey, if it works, who cares?" Amelia arrived the next day, bringing an air of mystery with her. She was in her early 50s, with piercing green eyes and a bundle of strange herbs tied to her belt. "Bowen," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Tyson told me you've got a pest problem. Let's fix that." Amelia wasted no time. She surveyed the cafe, muttering to herself and scribbling notes in a battered notebook. "These creatures are drawn to the energy here," she explained, sprinkling salt along the windowsills. "Your coffee is like a beacon, but it also holds the key to defeating them." Tyson nodded. "That's what I've been saying." With Amelia's help, we developed a 3-part defense strategy. Repellents. Tyson's coffee mixture would be enhanced with Amelia's herbal concoctions, creating a potent deterrent that could be sprayed or burned. Traps. Roman built several makeshift traps using Amelia's blueprints, which involved a mix of mechanical ingenuity and strange symbols. Escape plan. If all else failed, we would retreat to the old storm shelter beneath the cafe, which Amelia warded with protective charms. The night before the expected attack, the cafe was eerily quiet. Roman, Tyson, Amelia, and I sat around a table sipping coffee and going over the plan one last time. "You think we stand a chance?" I asked, breaking the silence. Amelia gave me a small, coughing smile. "The fact that you're asking that question means you're ready. Fear is a weapon, Bowen. Use it wisely." Tyson raised his cup. "To survival." "To survival," we echoed, though the words felt heavy. It began at midnight. The fog returned, thicker and more oppressive than before. The hum started faintly, then grew louder, vibrating through the walls. "They're here," Roman said grimly, gripping his knife. We took our positions. Amelia and Tyson manned the repellents, spraying the mixture around the entrances. Roman guarded the front door, his traps at the ready. I stayed behind the counter, monitoring the situation and preparing more of the coffee mixture. The first wave hit hard. Dark shapes slammed against the windows, their shrill cries echoing through the cafe. The repellents held them back, but barely. "They're testing us," Amelia warned. "Stay sharp." The second wave was more aggressive. One of the windows shattered, and a head stealer clawed its way inside. Roman took it down with a well-placed trap, but it was clear we were being overwhelmed. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Amelia unleashed her secret weapon. a burning mixture of herbs and Tyson's concoction. The smoke filled the room, and the head stealers recoiled, their cries turning to shrieks of pain. "It's working!" Tyson shouted. But then the leader appeared. Joe stepped through the broken window, his presence radiating power. The head stealers fell silent, their gazes fixed on him. "Impressive," he said, his voice calm. "But you can't win. Surrender, and I'll spare you." I stepped forward, my hands trembling, but my resolve firm. "This is our home, Joe. We're not giving it up." Joe's smile faded. "So be it." The battle raged on, but with Amelia's smoke and Tyson's repellents, we held our ground. Joe seemed immune to the mixture, but Amelia had one last trick up her sleeve. She handed me a small vial. "Pour this into the coffee machine. Trust me." I did as she said, and the machine hissed and sputtered before releasing a burst of steam. The head stealers screeched and retreated, their leader included. "You've won this round," Joe said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But we'll be back." By dawn, the fog had lifted, and the cafe was still standing. We were battered and exhausted, but alive. As we cleaned up, Tyson clapped me on the back. "Eat it good, Bowen. Real good." Amelia nodded. "The battle is over, but the war isn't. Stay vigilant." I knew she was right. The head stealers would return, but so would we. We had found strength in each other, and for now, that was enough. Bowen's Coffee was more than just a cafe. It was a sanctuary, a beacon of hope, and perhaps the first line of defense against the darkness. In the days that followed, the cafe became a gathering place for Fairwick. It wasn't just the coffee anymore. It was the sense of safety, the defiance against the encroaching darkness. People came not just for warmth, but for answers, looking to us like we were their last line of hope. I wasn't sure I liked the attention, but I couldn't turn them away. Roman stayed on high alert, always tinkering with traps or surveying the area. Tyson, true to form, was already scheming up new mixtures that could turn a tide if the head stealers ever returned. Amelia, meanwhile, slipped into a mentor role, teaching me and a handful of others about the herbs and charms that had saved us. But the peace was fragile, like the calm before another storm. One evening, as the sky turned a sickly orange, an unsettling hue that hadn't been seen before, a young girl burst into the cafe, her face pale and her breathing ragged. She couldn't have been more than 13. "They're back," she whispered, clutching a frayed doll. "I saw one in the woods." Roman dropped his mug with a clatter, already moving toward his weapon stash. Amelia placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Let her speak," she said softly. The girl's name was Anya, and she lived on the outskirts of Fairwick. She described seeing a tall, shadowy figure prowling near her family's home. "It wasn't like the others," she said, her voice trembling. "It looked human but wrong. Its eyes were glowing red." "Glowing red?" Tyson asked, his brow furrowing. "That's not a head stealer trait." Amelia exchanged a worried glance with Roman. "No, it isn't." The cafe fell silent as we all processed the implications. That night, we gathered in the back room, our unofficial war council. Roman spread out a map of Fairwick, marking the area where Anya had seen the figure. "We can't keep waiting for them to attack," Roman said, his voice firm. "We need to go on the offensive." "I agree," Tyson chimed in. "But if this thing isn't a head stealer, we don't know what we're up against." Amelia nodded. "Preparation is key. Whatever it is, it's testing the boundaries. We need to be ready." "What about the villagers?" I asked. "They're scared. We can't just leave them defenseless." Roman placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We walked, but if we don't figure out what's out there, none of us will stand a chance." The next evening, Roman, Amelia, Tyson, and I ventured into the woods where Anya had seen the figure. The air was heavy with an unnatural stillness, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Amelia led the way, her herbs and charms at the ready. Tyson carried a small flask of his latest concoction, muttering about how it would either save us or blow us up. Roman, ever the protector, kept his knife within reach. I stayed close to Roman, my heart pounding with every rustle of the leaves. "What exactly are we looking for?" I whispered. "Anything out of place. Amelia replied, her voice low. A disturbance in the natural order. We didn't have to wait long.